Hello ladies and gents, welcome to another repair video. Today we're going to be working on this switch Lite which has been sent in. I don't actually know what's wrong with this, so we're going to find out together. The ticket that it came with, it come from Console Repair London, and if I just cover up the customer's info there, all it says on the ticket is just free inspection, so I'm not entirely sure what's wrong with this, but we'll try and find out together and hopefully we can get it fixed and make some money. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to hook up a USB cable to my USB ammeter, and I'm going to see what kind of current is being drawn from the system. Let's see if it's charging. I have taken a quick look at the USB port. It doesn't look great. It's not the worst I've seen, but it doesn't look great. Alright, so nothing at all happening on the USB ammeter. But one thing about this ammeter is the cable only works one way when I'm connecting it up through the coupler. But both ways there, nothing appears to be happening. What I'm going to do is just confirm that my ammeter is working, and it is. So I'll just plug my phone in just to make sure it works, and then I can test it. Nothing at all happening with the charger, and it feels really weird. It doesn't quite plug in properly. It's very strange. So this could just be a charger issue, or it could have a more severe issue. So we'll take it apart, we'll see what's going on. Hopefully we can get it fixed, and hopefully you remember to subscribe to the channel. So if you are new to the channel and you enjoy repair content, then I would really appreciate it if you do subscribe and turn on bell notifications so that you're notified whenever I release a video. It would really make me happy. So the switch Lite, the problem with the switch Lite and the charger port is they can't technically be bought. You can't technically buy a charger port for these. You have to buy them modified, or you have to modify them yourself. Now, Console Repair London, the company who sends me a lot of these consoles, he doesn't actually know how. Well, he knows how to modify them. He's never actually done it. So he sends them to me when it's the switch Lite because he knows that I know how to do it, and he knows that I'm capable of doing it. So rather than risking messing it up himself, he sends them to me, which is fair enough, to be honest. He does normally do charger ports himself, but not on these. Alright, we've got an SD card here, 32 gig, very cheap Amazon special. But it is fair enough how he sends them to me rather than risking messing them up. I can appreciate that. I can appreciate sense, I suppose, if you want to call it that. So one thing I want to say is that I am now streaming on Twitch. So basically on Twitch, I don't just stream repair content, I also stream games as well. So I have a bit of fun, unwind a little bit, that sort of good stuff. And if you want to check me out, there'll be a link in the video description. And if you're feeling really generous, you can stop me from having to rummage through dustbins to find food. And the way you can do that is by linking your Amazon Prime account to Twitch and then subscribing to me on Twitch as a paid subscriber. It supports the channel, doesn't cost you anything if you link your Amazon Prime account, but it does help out the channel a whole bunch. So I do really appreciate it when people do that. And it's just started raining outside, which is always nice, as I hit record. So it hasn't rained all morning. It's 25 minutes past 9 in the morning right now. It hasn't rained all morning, hasn't rained all night, and I know that because I had a garden fire last night and it's still burning away. So it hasn't rained all night, and then as soon as I hit record, it wants to start raining. So now I'm going to talk louder and the audio quality might be a little bit sucky. So sorry about that. But I'm not going to let the weather faze me. No thank you. Okay, so like I said, the first issue that I noticed was that the charger port feels like it's damaged. It doesn't feel like the charger is going in all the way, and that's probably causing an issue. But I do want to check these two chips on the back here, and also the fuse on the charging port as well, just to see what's going on, see if we've got any other issues apart from the port. And then I'll get the port changed, maybe deal with whatever else is wrong, and I'll take it from there. So under the microscope then, you can see very visibly that the port there is slightly damaged. It's started to come apart. And obviously we can't just, well, we could technically just push it back in, but that's not the way we do things. So it's going to be replaced. But let's check this fuse and just see what's going on with that. So I've got my multimeter here set to continuity mode. That's going to tell me if we've got a continuous path from one probe to the other. So let's say, for example, I wanted to check for a continuous path here. I could just put one probe there, and you can see that's a continuous path. That's because both sides of this is ground. So even if this was to completely break apart, that would still be continuous, as long as it's connected to the board. But we've got a continuous path there, as you can see. So that's basically the gist of continuity mode. And that's going to tell me if this fuse is good, because a fuse should always have continuity. And indeed, the fuse appears to be fine. So let's check for any shorts on M92T36. This is the power management chip. To check for short, we just pop one probe on ground and the other probe on the input side of the capacitors. So this side here is going to be ground. I know that just from experience. This side here is connected to the chip, and this side shouldn't be shorted. Hello. Okay, so we have an issue there. Let me just check the CPU. So there's a capacitor here. And yep, that's not shorted. So that capacitor there is linked directly to the CPU. If that's shorted, then I'll just give up there and then. And that's basically the gist of it. So we need to get the port off, and then I'll test it again on M92T36, but it's very likely that I've got to replace that chip. So what I'll do is I'll hang the board over the edge of the table, and what that allows me to do is just basically heat up the port without setting fire to my table, and I can remove the port safely. So I've got the hot air set at 460 degrees Celsius, 40% airflow, and I've got no nozzle on the hot air gun. And I'm just going to heat up this area, and I'm going to use the drop method, but I'm not going to let the port drop out. I'm going to hold it in position while I'm heating it up. The reason for that is I don't want the port to drop out and tear the traces. But one thing you'll notice is I'm not using any kind of low melt solder. That's because there's pins underneath the port, and I don't want those to end up getting damaged. And I can't get to those pins. So that basically means that everything else heats up before the pins on the middle. Okay, so that port's just fell out. It actually fell out a lot quicker than I expected. But as you can see, it's a nice safe removal because everything melts at the same time. So step number 2, I want to check M92T36 again. But 90% of the time it's going to be shorted no matter what. It can be that the pins are shorted and that could cause it to give a false reading, but very unlikely. And yep, we still have shorts on M92T36. Let's just check around BQ24193. So let's check this coil. Coil's good. Do we have a short to ground on BQ? No, we don't. That was a false reading because I was touching that capacitor. So, apologies for that, you couldn't actually see. But I got a false reading because I was touching this capacitor here and the little one there. But the little one there, that side is ground. So we don't appear to have any shorts on BQ24193, which is good. So we've got an issue with M92T36, and we've got an issue with the port. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean out the port. So what I want to do with that is just basically clean out the lead-free solder, and then that will allow me to drop a new port in a lot easier. So we don't want to put too much heat in this area because we'll end up melting the port and other components around there, such as the fact that there are plastic components in that area on the other side of the board. So we don't want to put too much heat into it. So I replace the solder with leaded solder. And then I've got a choice. I can either use solder wick, or I can use a solder sucker and just suck out the holes. The only problem with solder suckers, they are fairly violent, so there is a chance of knocking components. So if you're not used to replacing really small components, then I don't recommend using the solder sucker. But if you don't mind replacing a couple of components that you knock, then the solder sucker is going to be the easiest thing to use. I'm going to try both methods, I think. So the first ones I'll do are going to be the edges. I'll use wick for those, and then the other ones I'll use the solder sucker. Just to show both methods. So I'm going to get some solder wick, and I'm just going to wick those holes away, as you can see. But one thing you'll notice is when I move on to the bigger ones, the ones at the top, it's going to be more awkward. Just make sure that's clean. But it's going to be more awkward because the ground plane there is bigger. There's more surface area and it sucks up a lot more heat. So if I try and wick these big ones away now, it's going to be rather tricky. Or it usually is. Yep, so it's not actually clearing out properly. I could use a bigger tip, but I would rather use the solder sucker. So as you can see there, it didn't quite clear out. I would rather use the solder sucker for these ones. So I'll take my hot air, put the nozzle back on, and then I'm going to heat it up, and I'm going to use the solder sucker to suck out the ground holes. I'm going to knock the airflow down. I'm going to go for 20% airflow. And like I said, using the solder sucker here is a little bit of a risk of knocking components, but it is a lot more effective, as you can see. It's super quick. It's basically a quick and dirty way to clean out the ground holes. But it does work. Okay, let's have a look. No knock components. And on that side as well. Awesome. So the next step is going to be to replace the solder that's on the pins themselves with some leaded solder. So now the trick is to replace the solder that's on here, but without re-tinning those ground legs. There you go. Beautiful. Alright, so now it's time to drop a new port on. So I'm going to grab a normal Nintendo Switch port. Like I said, we can't actually buy the Nintendo Switch Lite ports. We can buy them pre-modified, but they cost a premium. Bear in mind, the ports for the Nintendo Switch original cost me around about 50 to 60 pence each, or around about $1. And Switch Lite ports cost around about £7 to £8. So that's around about $10 US. And the reason for that is because they're not official ports, they're just modified. They're just modified ports. Someone is actually modifying them to make them fit. Now, fair enough, people have to pay for the time and stuff, but I would rather keep my own costs low, save myself some money, earn a little bit of extra money technically, and basically buy the original ports and modify them myself. It's well worth the investment if you're doing these on a regular basis to buy a Dremel, and it doesn't take more than a couple of minutes to actually modify the port. So basically, the port, what we need to do is we need to grind some of it away because the Switch Lite port is smaller than the Switch original port, so we have to grind some of it away at the end. So I'm going to flow this down. I'm going to set my hot air to 420 now. I'm working from the top of the board, and remember there are RAM ICs just here. For some reason I've got random jumper wire on the board. Very weird. But what I need to do is I need to get this port soldered without melting the battery connector. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to heat it up, and I'm basically going to just keep the airflow moving, and that's going to prevent it from melting the plastic. Might singe it a little bit, As long as it doesn't butcher it, I don't mind. But remember, we only have the pins to heat up here. Press down on the port and hold, let it settle, and it should be soldered. So if I give this a quick nudge now, yep, it feels okay. I'm not going to try and move it too much because it will just snap, but I am going to solder the ground legs in now, just so as I don't damage it. And notice how I added some flux there. Always add flux whenever you're soldering. Okay, that was a little bit awkward with my left hand there. Let's try that again. Okay. Let's solder it from this side as well. Make sure that we've got enough solder going through. Ground legs soldered. Let's move on to the back pins. So now I'm going to need to solder the back pins and make sure that we've got a nice connection on those. The pins on the middle should be connected, but the back pins, they take a little bit more sometimes, so I'll just do it anyway. I don't check whether they're soldered, I just do it, just because it's quicker. Long term it's quicker, because most of the time I have to touch these back ones up. Alright, don't appear to have any bridges on there. I'm going to clean up and just make sure that we don't. I'm going to heat up as well, just to melt that flux. If flux doesn't come off, just warm it up, but not with the iron. Warm it up with hot air. Alright, we don't have any bridges there, and we've got some nice solid joints, or what appear to be solid joints, but I always give them a nudge test. Always give them a nudge test. The reason for that is because looks can be deceiving. The amount of times I've had ports come in which people have said, oh, they've been changed by someone else, and they look fine, but it's not working. I've lost count. And half the time it's because it's not fine, it just looks fine. Alright, I'm just going to melt this. The flux, that is, not the solder. I'm just going to give it a clean. Make sure that we clean as we go. Makes it easier later on. Beautiful. Alright. So, we also have an issue with M92T36, so I'm going to get that changed. Let's just add a little bit of flux. And I'm still on 420 degrees Celsius hot air, 40% airflow. I'm going to use the drop method. So I've lifted the board up by the chip. And you see how the board dropped down? Kept all of the solder joints intact and removed it without knocking any components. That's what I like to call the drop method. Basically what that does is it puts some downward pressure on the chip and it makes it come off really, really cleanly. So now what I'm going to do is just tack the chip down. So I'm going to hold it roughly in position, doesn't have to be perfect. I'm going to hold it roughly in position, let go of the tweezers on one side, and that should be not soldered, but it'll be tacked down. Just like that. So if I tap on it, it won't move. And by doing that, it's going to prevent it from blowing all over the place when I add flux to it to solder it properly. So now I can just resolder this now. You might be wondering why I'm not actually replacing the solder, and that's because there's nothing at all wrong with the solder that's on there at the minute. Nothing whatsoever. Surface tension should take this chip. And actually it appears fine. There we go, give it a tap. Doesn't need much. Just a slight tap just to make sure that it's connected. And we're good. Add a bit more flux. And then I'm going to press down on the chip. And I'm going to make sure that the chip is flat to the board. And once it's flat to the board, you'll probably see a little bit of solder squeeze out. Someone actually asked me on YouTube if there's a risk of the solder shorting between the middle ground pad and the pads on the outside. Personally, in the probably hundreds of, well, I know it's hundreds of chips, hundreds upon hundreds of chips I've changed, I've never had that happen. It was a good question, it did get me thinking, but I've never had that happen. Out of all of the chips that I've changed, I personally press down on every single one of them to make sure it's flat to the board, and I've never had the solder that squeezes out from underneath the chip bridge between ground on the middle pad and the pins on the outside or the pads on the outside. I've never had that happen. If anyone's ever had that happen, let me know. I would love to know. But I don't think it's possible. I'll just basically grab that bit of solder that scrolls out and just make sure that we've got no bridges. And that is literally it for the chip. And clean it up using isopropyl alcohol. And good. Should be absolutely fine. Okay, so chips replaced, ports replaced. All I need to do now is basically just Dremel down the port, make sure that the port is going to be fitting inside the case, give it another clean, and then hopefully we should be good to go. So I'm going to get my Dremel. So what I'm going to do with this is going to get a little bit noisy, so I'll probably mute it. But what I'm going to do is the edge of the port, I'm going to grind down until it's almost flat with the ridge on the outer casing of the port. So I'm going to grind it down using a Dremel. I don't know what bit this is, honestly. I don't have a clue what bit it is, unfortunately. All I know is that it's an official Dremel 300i. It's a good little Dremel. Okay, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to set it to number 2 on the speed. Very low. Very low indeed. I'm just going to grind down the port. Okay, that should be good. Let me just show you that under the microscope. But as you can see now, it's relatively flat. I've ground down the edge as well to remove any sharp bits. It's relatively flat. Not perfect, but I'm never going to get it perfect. In fact, I could do with a little bit more there on the edge, to be honest. Let's just do a little bit more. There we go. Okay, so that's that. But now if we take a look inside, we've got 2 issues. The first issue is going to be that we are going to have a little bit of a lip inside. And the second issue is we've got metal shards all inside. We don't want either, because if we leave the lip, it's going to damage the port, and if we leave the shard, it's going to short the port. So I'll take an X-Acto knife and just slice around the edge. And then what I also need to do is clean it out. So I'll use the toothbrush and some isopropyl alcohol and just give it a good scrub. So I'll just give it a really good clean inside using the toothbrush. Get rid of those metal shards. We don't want to leave those in there. Remember, metal is conductive. And if we leave any metal shards in there, it's going to short out the pins. And we're going to be right back to square one. In fact, it could be worse. We could short out the pins and damage the CPU. That is a possibility. So make sure it's nice and clean. And also that's going to get rid of any flux inside the port as well. Alright, let's inspect that. Oh, there you go. Beautiful. Nice and clean. So not perfect by any means. But it's the best we're going to get. Well, it's the best I'm going to get. Alright, let's give it a test. So now comes the testing part. So what I need to do is I need to just put it back inside the case. And the problem with the testing process is this battery is probably really dead. That is the issue. This battery is probably really dead. Now I could if I'd have actually remembered to do it, I could have just hooked up another board to it, because I do have a test board for the switch Lite. What I like to do with these a lot of the time is when I'm working on the device is I like to plug the battery in just to another board that I know is going to charge the battery, so as I haven't got to wait as long. But I need to make sure that it's going to charge the battery. But I forgot to do it this time, which is kind of annoying to be honest, because now I've got to wait. Alright, so time to hook up the battery now that I've got everything connected up. And if I see a charging symbol, then what I'll do is I'll screw it all down. I'll get it all ready to go back together and then leave it to charge. So I'm going to take my USB ammeter here. I'm going to confirm again that it's working with my phone. And it's not this time if you look. There we go. Okay, 9 volts, blah blah blah. Cool. Okay, moment of truth. Is it going to charge or is it going to stiff us? It's charging. And we get a display. Let's go. That's what I'm talking about. Okay, so the final step for me is to leave this to charge, but while I'm doing that, I'm not going to be wasting much time. Well, I am, because it's going to take forever. It's charging at 0.11 amps, which means it's very dead right now. So rather than wasting all of the time, I'm going to put it back together. I can see that it's charging. We shouldn't have any more issues with this. But I'm going to put it all back together while I'm waiting for the battery to charge up. But this is good news. It means that the board should work. I'm going to tread carefully there, because every time I say something like it's going to be an easy fix, or it should work, or it should be fine, I'll get bit in the butt. Okay, so this is still charging at the minute, but I'm ready to see if the charging port is going to line up, so I do have to unplug it for a minute just to make sure that the charging port's going to line up. If it doesn't, it's not the end of the world. I don't have to take it. Oh, that's just turned on. Sweet. But I don't have to take it fully back apart to be able to Dremel it down a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is just give it a quick test fit and make sure it works. And yep, I can't see any bulge in the case there, which is good. But I'm not going to know 100% until I screw it down. So I need to make sure that with pressure off the screws, it's not going to cause any kind of bulge. Nope, absolutely perfect. I'll show you that under the microscope and show you how it actually lines up. Getting those lined up with your eye without having to use any other port or anything for a guide, you know, that is going to come with a little bit of experience as you do more of them. I haven't done that many of these myself, probably around about 15 tops, 15 to 20 maximum. So if I can do that after just doing like 15 to 20 maximum, then you know, it's not going to be difficult for people to do. I'm going to plug this back in for a minute because it is dead. It is now fast charging though. So we've got 0.67 amps, which is cool. That means that it's fully charging successfully. I'll test it on the other side of the port though, as soon as I've got the rest of these screws in. Just 3 more screws to do. So that's that done. Okay, the switch has crashed. What? That's weird. Yeah, it froze for a minute. I'll keep an eye on that. Let's see if it charges the other side. It does indeed. Fast charging as well. Cool. Alright, so I guess I'll just need to give this a test, but I can do that off camera. But let me just show you this lining up on the port. So if you take a look at the alignment of the port here, you'll see that it's I'm not going to say it's perfect. It's not perfect, but it's pretty damn close. There is a slight gap there, which, I mean, what's that going to let in? A little bit more dust? Meh. There's a slight gap in it. It's not perfect, but it's by no means the worst job in the world as well. I'm happy with that and I will take it. So that is pretty much that. Bear in mind I've been talking throughout this process. Bear in mind talking on a video causes things to take a lot longer. I've been filming right now for 56 minutes and 40 seconds unedited. By the time I edit it, it'll be a lot quicker, but 56 minutes and 40 seconds unedited is not a bad time to replace a chip and to replace a port and modify that port while you're on a video. So you can imagine that it doesn't take that long at all once you're used to it. Yep, let's restart later. Fine. I know that the SD card's working because it's come up with that. So all that's left for me to do on this is just to give it a full test. So I need to give it a final test with the game cards and things like that. But other than that, this console should realistically be fully working. And it even loads a game. Awesome. Okay, well, I'm going to leave it there for the video. That is pretty much that. So let's just summarise on this then. The console was sent in with absolutely no information at all, and just by plugging it in I was able to deduce that it wasn't charging, and by the feel of it I could tell that the charger port was bad. So when I took it apart, it turns out that the charger port was bad, but also the M92T36 was bad as well. So it just didn't go in right, and you could just feel it that it wasn't going in right. So by replacing the port, by replacing the chip, and by modifying the original Nintendo Switch port to fit in the Switch Lite, this thing works again, and the customer hopefully is going to be happy. But that's going to be it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. Let me know what you think down in the comments down below. I do always enjoy reading your guys' comments, and I also enjoy replying to them as well. It gives me something to do during the breaks, so in between jobs. If you want to organise a repair, you can do so. Get me in touch using the website address in the video description. And if you want to support the channel, you can do so by becoming a Patreon supporter using the link in the video description. You can become a channel member using the join button down below the video, or you can head over to Twitch. You can link your Amazon Prime account and you can become a Twitch Prime subscriber. Every one of those methods, as well as watching these videos, all help out the channel a bunch. If you enjoyed the video and you want to see more repair content, please don't forget to subscribe and turn on bell notifications. Around about 50% of my viewers are not subscribed, so I would really appreciate it if you hit subscribe. And while you're there, you could always hit that thumbs up button. Dislike it if you disliked it. Let me know why in the comments. Let me know if you dislike it. I'm not going to be mad, I promise. I'm not a scary guy. In fact, I'm like a kitten. But that's going to be for this video. Thank you very much for watching. Until next time, I'll see you later. Bye for now.